This is a true story about Unit 731, and as such, I recommend you go about watching this video with the utmost care, knowing that what you're about to hear is full of true and disturbing content, so please watch with caution. The horrors of Unit 731. In the annals of human history, few chapters remain as haunting and abhorrent as that of Unit 731. Unit 731 was a research facility shrouded in darkness and infamy. The origins of Unit 731 can be traced back to the early 1930s in the midst of the Sino-Japanese War. Conceived under the guise of Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army, this sinister facility was anything but benevolent. Nestled in the depths of Pingfang, a remote region in China, Unit 731 was established under the leadership of Lieutenant General Shiroishi, a man who would become synonymous with human cruelty. Inside the walls of Unit 731, an abyss of unspeakable experiments unfolded. Human subjects, often referred to as logs, were subjected to a litany of horrors that defied the limits of humanity's moral compass. These experiments encompassed a nightmarish array of biological, chemical, and physiological tests. Subjects were exposed to lethal pathogens, forcibly infected with diseases like anthrax, bubonic plague, and even syphilis. Vivisections were conducted without anesthesia, organs removed while victims were still alive, their agonized screams silenced by the walls that bore witness. Unit 731 operated under the guise of scientific research, with the aim of producing biological weapons for wartime use. The data extracted from these inhumane experiments was used to develop methods of infection, disease transmission, and biological warfare tactics. These weapons of suffering were intended to be unleashed on unsuspecting populations, sowing destruction and death on an unprecedented scale. One of the most unsettling aspects of Unit 731's activities was the total disregard for human life. Victims referred to as logs, stripped of their humanity and reduced to mere test subjects. Their suffering was met with callous indifference, their pain a means to an end for these researchers. The facility's research also extended beyond biological experiments. Prisoners were subjected to live ammunition tests, flamethrower tests, and even exposure to toxic gas. Some were also subjected to lethal doses of radiation to study the long-term effects. In some cases, they studied frostbite and hypothermia. Victims were subjected to freezing temperatures just to see the effects of frostbite and hypothermia. Limbs were frozen and thawed repeatedly, leading to gangrene and amputation in many cases. In a horrifying tale from one of the members of Unit 731, he spoke about two men who were subjected to a hypothermia study. These men were subjected to horrifying circumstances of freezing, in which they would scream out in pain and agony for each other due to the pain they were experiencing. From what he said, the men that were experiencing this started to dig their fingernails into each other just to feel warm. Other experiments simulated horrifying pressure chambers. These conditions would be high altitude, which victims were placed in low pressure chambers. The effects of decompression sickness, which occurs when rapid pressure change causes nitrogen bubbles to form in the bloodstream, were studied at the cost of victims' lives. The victims who were exposed to the viruses such as bubonic plague, anthrax, and glanders, they studied the effects of these diseases on living organisms, watching the bodies wither and succumb to the ravages of infection. Some victims were intentionally infected with multiple diseases, observing how they interacted and exacerbated each other's effects. Organs were removed one by one, often without regard for the victims' lives. These procedures, intended to observe the body's response to injury and disease, were carried out in excruciating detail and sometimes lasted for hours. Before doing so, victims were brought in, often in healthy conditions, being fed and given alcohol to drink. Unit 731 wanted all of their victims in the best possible conditions for these horrifying experiments. Those brought in would have a life expectancy of around 2 months. Those who were lucky enough would have a life expectancy of a little over a year. Unit 731's depravity reached new depths with the inclusion of child victims. Innocent infants, often born to mothers within the facility, were subjected to gruesome experiments. They were deliberately infected with diseases to observe their effects on developing bodies. Some were used to study the vertical transmission of diseases from mother to child. As the war drew to a close, the true extent of Unit 731's atrocities began to surface. With the surrender of Japan in 1945, a shroud of secrecy was lifted, revealing a grim tablet of horror. Thousands of lives had been extinguished within the walls of the facility, their suffering etched into the very fabric of the place. The death toll extended beyond the immediate victims as the pathogens studied within the compound were released into the environment. In the aftermath of World War II, a shocking twist of fate shielded the architects of Unit 731 from justice. In exchange for the research data gathered during their heinous experiment, the United States granted immunity to Ishii and his associates. This immunity served as a disturbing reminder of how politics and expediency can undermine the pursuit of justice. Those who were taken elsewhere were given trials for arrest, while Ishii and his associates taken by the US were not. Their crimes and punishments of around 30,000, if not over, would go unnoticed, and they would get off scot-free. Unit 731's horrors were shrouded in silence, both by the perpetrators and by the international community. For decades, the suffering of its victims remained a footnote, an uncomfortable truth buried beneath layers of denial and avoidance. It wasn't until the 1980s that survivors and historians began to speak out, pushing for recognition and accountability. The legacy of Unit 731 is a chilling reminder of the depths of human cruelty that can be plumbed in the name of scientific advancement and military prowess. It stands as a testament to the power of propaganda, secrecy, and lengths to which humanity can go when unchecked. Many of the members of Unit 731 made it out with their hands clean, washing their past sins away through the US government. As horrifying and cruel as all these experiments were, somehow those in Unit 731 were absolved of their sins. Unit 731's legacy is a haunting echo that resonates through time. A reminder that even in the darkest corners of history, there's a need to shine a light on the truth. These atrocities, committed within its walls, serve as a somber testament to the fragility of human morality and the potential for evil when empathy is discarded. It is our responsibility to remember, to honor those victims, and to ensure that the horrors of Unit 731 are never repeated again.